This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our virtual resource fair, Immigration Services for Victims of Domestic Violence. I'm super excited to have these amazing presenters with us from these wonderful agencies. Going first today is going to be Dr. Nusrat Ameen. She is with Daya here in Houston. And then Miss Karla Perez is going to be presenting from Tahirih Justice Center. And they'll be tag teaming a little bit on this first part of the presentation. They're going to be sharing with you guys some information about what each of their agencies do and how they support victims of domestic violence, as well as going into some of the barriers that victims of domestic violence face regarding immigration. So Dr. Ameen, if you'd like to go ahead and get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon with all of us in this strange world that we are in. We are getting used to Zoom meetings, remote meetings, and that has become our new normal. So I am at Daya. It's a South Asian organization, and I'm the Senior Director for Legal Services. They have been there for the last 13 years. And if you are wondering what Daya means, or if Daya is an acronym, it is not. It is a Sanskrit word meaning compassion. And Daya was founded in 1996 after with a group of South Asian women who started this organization after a tragic incident of murder-suicide, where a South Asian woman who was a professional was going through domestic violence, and there wasn't any South Asian organization at that point in Houston. Killed her 3 children, her abuser husband, and put the house on fire and killed herself. So that gave the reason for the South Asian women who came together and thought of having an organization that can prevent such incidents going forward. So that is how Daya started as a volunteer organization, and slowly in 2005 we had our first staff, and then on the journey started, and now we are a full-fledged staff-run organization. So Daya provides culturally specific services to South Asian clients. Melanie, okay, it's working. It's working. Okay, so we provide cultural specific services to South Asian survivors of abuse, and research shows that women from the South Asian community, they feel more at ease if their advocates are from their culture and they understand the issue particular to the South Asian community. And abused women have a lot of barriers that they face. And for South Asian immigrants who come from all these South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, and Maldives and Afghanistan, when they come on the abuser's immigration status, their barriers become, much more complicated than for any other, clients who are, who face domestic violence. And one of them is, of course, the language barriers and the lack of knowledge of fear of deportation, immigration issues, etc. And research also shows that 50% of the women who experience intimate partner abuse are not aware of all the resources that are available in and around the places that they live in. And for culturally competent services, if you try to think of what that is, it is not about hiring a person who knows the language. It is all about a person ensuring that the survivors are understood on the cultural level, and that some of their barriers are seeking help might be preempted or addressed, and that suggestion by service providers will not further isolate them from the community. For example, for a South Asian client, if you say that you need to go to a therapist, they're going to shut down because the word therapy is itself a taboo. And so the service holder, the first responders that they come across, if they refrain from using the word therapy and say you need to go to someone who will listen to you, will have that client, feel at ease to go to a counselor to seek help. So at Daya, we do provide culturally specific services like that. And we have a confidential helpline where clients call and advocates help them during Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And after that, if there are any calls that requires necessary or immediate help, we do get back to them. We do the crisis intervention where upon calling, if a person is in an imminent danger, we make sure first of all whether the person is at a place where she's safe or he is safe to speak, and then we do the we talk about the safety tools. And if you visit our website www.dayahouston.org, you will see that we have an extensive safety guideline while the person is with the abuser, at the time of leaving, and after the person has left. So there are 3 phases of safety planning that we make sure that we do. We do case management, we assess the client to see what are the helps that they need, and we do that. The most important thing is we have licensed counselors who counsels these survivors so that they can process their thoughts. We have a supportive housing program where we provide the survivors with the housing, with RRH, rapid rehousing, for 12 months. We have our own housing program where if the client does not fall under the eligibility of the RRA, we provide rental assistance, short-term, mid-term, and long-term. We do have Section 8 that we help our survivors with as well. When I joined Daya in 2008, January 1st, I realized, because I have a legal background, I realized that majority of our clients need the legal assistance. And what we did is we started a program called the Legal Clinic, whereby we provide family and immigration legal assistance and consultation with attorneys, and we became a BIA accredited agency. So we also provide immigration help through our legal clinic. And through the outreach and education, we provide a lot of services. For example, we have seminars, we have booths, we have film shows, and we have different kinds of throughout the year we have different events to inform the community about our program, to actively engage and mobilize the South Asian community, including families, individuals, community advocates, and religious organizations and other institutions in the movement to end violence against women. How we are unique. As I began my talk by saying that we are a culturally competent agency. All our advocates are culturally trained. They understand where and what point and at what emotional level the clients are, and they meet the client at that particular space. For example, we know that we come from a culture of collectivism, and we for us it is family comes first. So when a person is asked to call 911, she may not call 911, but we must understand why she's not calling 911 at that point. She may have a sibling back home who may not be married because she has called the 911, and you know, family of the abuser and everyone in their community back home came to know about that. So we have to meet the client when they are ready to call 911, and that is where cultural competency is so important. And we speak 12 languages between the staff, volunteers, and the board. There are lots of South Asian languages. India alone has 15 languages. So you can understand that how many diverse languages that the South Asian community speaks. We also address the homelessness related to domestic violence through our housing program, and that's how we address the barriers. We provide the immigration help, and we have a lot of clients whose visas are dependent on the abusers. So we address that through our immigration program, through our legal clinic. Many of our clients go through situations of divorce, custody, and property division, etc. And we address that through our legal clinic. We partner with a lot of pro bono agencies like Tahirih Justice Center and Lone Star and AFDA and the Catholic Charities and many others, like 18 pro bono agencies we partner with, and we have 25 active private attorneys who give consultations and and represent the clients as per eligibility. They are not our clients. We do not have legal attorneys on board, but we partner with all these private attorneys who believe in our mission. So that is how we address all these barriers, and then we empower our clients to addressing these barriers through our case management, helping them getting the job, or help them with the career counseling, etc., to empower them to become independent. In 2019, we had taken 409 helped 409 clients. We offered 174 months of housing for 43 families, 894 hours of counseling, 542 pro bono consultation and representation, and we did 180 outreaches, which reached out to 6,311 community members. So that is how we, we make domestic violence, issues, and talk about the domestic violence issues to the community to make them aware that we are here, we can help them. What is domestic violence? So it is a pattern of abuse behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over the other intimate partner. So what can that be? An abusive behavior can be anything from physical to sexual to emotional to economic and education. So it can encompass many types of behavior to maintain that power and control. And immigration is one of the unique things that we see our clients and others, as I will also on top of the in-law abuse that we see. So this power and control can be manifested in different ways, and immigration can be a tool for the abuser to hold like a trump card against the victim, survivor, to control. And that we are going to just discuss it with Daya client story. For 8 long years, I lived a life of violence and humiliation. My ex-husband abused me physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually, but I couldn't leave. I was alone with no friends and no one in the country, completely depending on him. I had no credit cards, no credit history, no work authorization, no access to documents like tax return, no money, no car or driver's license, and no knowledge of the system in the country. He told me that if I took my son without his permission, I would be charged with kidnapping, and that if I left him, I would lose my immigration status and be deported without my son. I felt trapped on every front. Recently, I started sharing my feelings with friends, family, and others. So if you look at this case, you will see that there are multi-layered. And this is a very common case that we see. Clients who get married and come here on the abuser's visa become dependent. And there are some visas where the dependent does not even have any work authorization. They cannot work here, so they become dependent more on the abuser, and that is called H4. So you may hear about clients who have come on dependent on the abuser's visa, who have come here to work on an H1 visa, and they're dependent as a spouse. And many states don't even give them driver's license. Texas do give driver's license, but they don't have the work authorization, and they can't work here. So what happens is that they become they become victims, and they become doubly trapped because they don't have the financial freedom to take a step and to get out of the relationship. And the abuser keeps on saying that you will be deported if you divorce me, because you're going to not be dependent on me anymore, so you will lose your status and you will be deported, while our son, who's born here in the USA and is a US citizen, will be here. So that is very traumatic for a victim survivor, even to think how that person, she can take a step, unless she comes to organizations like Daya and for Tahirih to know that they do have resources on the UVisa. And we'll be talking more about the immigration, but this is a very common scenario that we see when clients, when they're going to domestic violence, they not only go through a lot of barriers that they have to overcome. Immigration adds to that barrier and makes it very difficult journey for them to come out and to reclaim their lives. So Daya has created a tool. This is bridging the cultural divide. So dealing with immigrant survivors, it is important to note that they may face additional barriers, right? As we were just discussing. The wheel reflects these barriers to keep in mind while bridging the gaps. And the unique abuses are that we see on top of the language and the financial and the isolation and the religious abuse and immigration, in-law abuse and transnational immigration that we see in the abuse in the South Asian clients that we deal with. And so you will see that some of them are unique, right? The in-law abuse. Survivors may live with the extended family because, as I said, we come from a culture of collectivism. Family comes first. There are many South Asian families who live in a joint family systems where the in-laws are with them. And if the in-laws are abusive, then it adds a barrier to that abuse on top of the spouse being abusive. Even if the in-laws are not here and they are in the home country, there is always a strict gender role that we follow in South Asian cultures, where the families, the elders' wisdom, elders' decision are carried on by the next generations, because that is what we respect. So if that becomes, if the balance is tilted, it becomes abusive, and it becomes it is a unique abuse that we see in our culture. Transnational abandonment, this is something very unique, and I'm not sure whether you have heard about it. And while I'm talking, if you have questions, please put it on the chat box so we can address it later. Transnational abandonment is something that we see in our clients, where it can happen in 3 different ways. One is when it is naturally like an abandonment, where the abuser just just locks the client out of the house and abandons her. That is abandonment. But when the client, we have had lot of situations where the abusers, by coercion or by intimidation, or just by convincing the client, takes her or him to the home country, and for saying that, oh, let's go and see your parents, we haven't been there for some time, or let's go and celebrate your sister's marriage. And they go there with the family, with the children, and after some time the abuser leaves with their children, saying that their school is going to open, so let me go back with the children and you can join me later. And once the abuser is gone, she finds that there is the abuser has taken all her documents and everything and left her there. And when she keeps on calling, he does not respond, and her return ticket is cancelled. This is something unique that we see. And then for the client, it becomes very difficult to even come back to USA, because she doesn't have any support system here, number one. Number two is she doesn't even have her documents. By the time she understands that she can go to the US consulate, get a travel visa, some time is already wasted. And by the time she comes here, and we have several cases like that, and comes here and goes to the children's school, and she's served with a divorce, 8-9 months are gone already, and when we represent her, she goes to the court, she loses her primary custody. And it is very difficult for the courts and judges to understand what transnational abandonment means, and why she did not return the next day or next week, and it took her like 8-9 months to come to the court to reclaim the custody. So it is a very, very, very traumatic situations that our clients go through, and there is a lot of literature on it. If you Google, you'll see there's a lot of literature on it. We are constantly researching on these, and we are constantly trying to educate the court system about the transnational abandonment. The other transnational abandonment can be where the abusers go to the home country, marries and honeymoons and comes back, but never gets in touch with the victim, and sometimes they're left pregnant. So there can be a lot of culturally cultural barriers that can happen, and we have to be know about these cultural barriers so that we can address it, and so to help the victims, survivors. So immigration status, because we have said that immigration is such a big component of these barriers. In this slide, you'll see that abuse rates in marriages between US citizens and immigrant women may be 3 times higher than in the general US population. And nearly 75% of the abused undocumented women in one survey said that their spouses had never filed immigration papers for them. So all these immigration researches show that immigrant survivors suffer more and severe and more often the abuse than the general US population. And if In the next slide, you will see that how the National Victim Advocacy Survey and how this has shown how immigration impacts the survivors. In May 2017, a coalition of national organizations gathered feedback from 750 advocates and attorneys from across the United States, learning that many immigrant victims of domestic violence and sexual assault were afraid to call the police or go to the court to get help. And the advocates report that survivors have increased fear of deportation, retaliation by the abusers, and separation from the children. And in this survey, we have seen that there was an increase of fear, 62%. And 78% said yes, immigrant about the concerns of their concerns about getting help from the police. And 3 out of 4 advocates report that immigrant survivors have concerns about going to court for a matter related to the abuse or offender. And 43% advocates work with immigrant survivors, seen that there was a drop of the cases because they were fearful to continue their cases. And so we see that even when Congress has, has taken into account that perpetrators often exploit the victims' lack of immigration status as a tactics of abuse and maintaining power and control by reinforcing fears of deportation, and has, with this recognition, created important legislations like VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, and Trafficking Victims Prevention Act. It is still seen that a lot of cases, abusers are still using this tool to abuse victims. And in 2019, November 7, there was a report by a Center of Investigation reporting by Laura Moral. She's an immigration reporter, and she had showed that 1 in 4 law enforcement agencies create barriers in UVisas, and they hold that as a power. And even if 1994 or 94, the Congress has passed the Violence Against Women Act, etc., to address the gender-based violence, there was a gap, and after 6 years it was passed, lawmakers saw the gap, that it didn't apply to many domestic violence victims or survivors of other violent crimes. The Violence Against Women Act only addresses survivors whose spouses are either green card holder or citizens, but it was harder for other crimes. For example, what about the H-4 visa holders, or what about students who are abused by their partners? So that resulted in the lawmakers to think about UVisa, which grants temporary status to undocumented victims for a lot of violent crimes such as rape, domestic violence, kidnapping, felonious assault, etc. But there wasn't any unanimous no agency had a type of transparency as to when they were or weren't doing it. The most important fact for UVisas, the first step for getting the UVisa is U certification, and there is no uniform way of doing it. So in Texas, different police departments have different ways of handling it. So Congress didn't include any provision in the UVisa statute that would hold agencies that didn't request the accountability. So, and here we face a lot of barriers for the clients because we have to wait for the Hello? Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay. Did you lose me for some time? I don't know. So the impact on the law and enforcement was in the ACLU in 2018 had a survey where 69% of the police officers said domestic violence crimes have become harder to investigate. 54% of judges reported court cases were interrupted due to immigration crime survivors' fear of coming to the court, and 82% of the prosecutors reported that since January 17, domestic violence is now underreported and harder to investigate. So there were a lot of recommendations, and the most important and the foremost was educating. So educating people about the domestic violence and immigration and how it impacts, educating the first responders, the police, the law enforcement, and the people who are certifying agency like the courts and the judges. So education is always a tool to make people aware of how to help the survivors. And it is very important, and that is the reason we are having this conversation today, for all of us to be aware of how we can help survivors with a cultural lens where immigration also adds to the barriers. And I will now pass on to Karla from Tahirih Justice Center, who's going to talk about all the laws that are available that can help survivors of domestic violence to address the barriers. Thank you.
All right, Karla, give me just 1 second. Okay, so you're now presenting. If you'd like to go ahead and share your page. Perfect. Again, if y'all have questions for either of our presenters, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we will address them at the end.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Karla Perez, and I'm an Equal Justice Works Fellow at the Tahirih Justice Center in Houston. I'm an attorney on the staff, and I represent survivors of gender-based violence, immigrant survivors of gender-based violence. In my role as an Equal Justice Works Fellow, I focus on providing our services that are holistic legal services, and I'll discuss what that means in a little bit, but to survivors in underserved areas. So a lot of my caseload is made up of survivors that are in Montgomery County, Fort Bend County, Galveston County, Baytown, Pasadena, lots of areas where there are no legal services providers who represent people in their immigration cases. And so I'll have my contact information at the end of the slide, but please feel free to put in questions as we go ahead. And thanks so much for having me. I know we're all inside, and it's great to be able to see different faces. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. And let me see if I can defeat my how to start the presentation here. There we go. Okay, so we'll talk about the Tahirih Justice Center and the work that we do, a little bit more facts of things that might be interesting or surprising to you. We'll discuss who is immigration and what do they do, and different forms of relief for survivors. So these are the different types of forms of application for survivors to allow them to stay in the United States. And then I'll share some local resources at the end. So the Tahirih Justice Center, we were started by Layli Miller Muro in 1997 after she was involved in an immigration case as a law student. And so this case ended up being a very high profile case, matter of Kasinga. And in this case, Fawzia Kasinga, who was a 17-year-old girl fleeing Togo in fear of forced marriage and female genital mutilation, sought asylum in the United States. And instead of finding the protection that she should have when she got here, she spent more than 17 months in detention. And so Layli helped bring her case to the highest immigration court in the nation. And after a lot of advocacy, both in the courts and outside of the courts, they granted asylum to Ms. Kasinga. And this case enabled immigrant women to receive asylum in the US on the grounds of gender-based persecution. So that was the first time that we had this type of gender-based asylum case. And so at the Tahirih Justice Center, what makes us different is that we provide legal and social services to our clients. What that means is, as I am working with my clients on their immigration case, we realize that immigration status, a work permit, a green card is not the end all be all. And so our social services team helps meet our clients' basic needs of other things that they may require while we're working on their immigration case. For example, connecting our clients to medical resources, mental health resources, advocacy, and these different kinds of systems that are not designed, frankly, to serve survivors, much less immigrant survivors. And so at our Houston office, we only represent in immigration proceedings. We don't do family law. Some of our other offices across the country do, but we only represent for immigration law, while at the same time providing our social services to those clients. So let's see here. Every once in a while, this gets a little frozen. What we also have at the Tahirih Justice Center is we carry out public policy advocacy. And so together with providing our direct services and training and educating stakeholders in the community, we also engage in public policy advocacy to correct flaws, close gaps in the justice system, so that we reduce the vulnerability and exploitation amongst immigrant women. And so we're able to uplift the experiences of our immigrant survivors to get, for example, new legislation that will better protect survivors. And we're very happy actually to share that in our Houston office at Tahirih, we have a local public policy advocacy team that is focused on doing this advocacy more locally. So we're very excited about that. Let's see. So some information, just like, did you know, more than half of female migrants that are traveling to the United States through Mexico are raped or sexually assaulted along the way. And this is, this is very important as, in the past few years, we have seen a lot of barriers placed before these migrants to enter the United States. And I'll get ahead of myself, but when I talk about asylum, I'll touch on this. But for asylum seekers to actually present themselves at the US-Mexico border or at any border port of entry, that's legal. So they are following the law by presenting themselves at the border and asking for asylum because they are afraid to go back to their home countries. So that is actually following the law, and unfortunately, survivors, many people who are fleeing gender-based violence in their home countries are unable to even access asylum because of current barriers. Immigrant women and girls are up to 2 times more likely to experience domestic violence in the general population. And Dr. Ameen did a wonderful job at explaining why that is. 72% of abusive partners fail to give their spouses legal immigration status as a tool of control, so that they can continue to hold over the fact that they don't have a green card or the fact that they could get them deported as a means to keep their immigrant spouses in the relationship. And 1 in 5 immigrant domestic violence survivors cite fear of deportation as a reason for staying with their abuser. And what is very concerning right now is, as we are all at home during the COVID-19 crisis, the power dynamics of abuse are worsened. I myself have a number of clients who live at home with their abusers, and definitely very, very concerned about their safety and checking up on them. And it's difficult because the abusers hold an even greater economic and physical control during this time. So I'll stop there. I'm just going to see if there are any questions here. Okay. So forms of violence that are experienced by our clients are, first you should know, 70% of them are fleeing gender-based violence that happen in the United States. So while a lot of our clients are fleeing gender-based violence that happened in countries outside of the United States, most of our cases, the violence happened here. And what the violence can look like is sexual assault, rape, honor crimes, domestic violence, female genital mutilation, forced marriage, trafficking, torture. Those are the forms of violence experienced by our clients. So I'll start now on who is immigration. A lot of times people are like, oh, I'm scared of immigration, or, that person is going to call immigration on you. And so that's very broad. And I want to discuss who immigration actually is. The United States has a long history of regulating immigration back to the 1860s, and a little bit of high school civics here. The US Congress, which is the legislative branch of the federal government, they develop and they pass legislation, which the president then signs into law. And federal agencies, who are part of the executive branch along with the president, implement legislation. So our immigration laws are implemented by these federal agencies. The 4 major players are the Department of Homeland Security, which I'll talk about in a little bit, the Department of Justice, which houses our Executive Office for Immigration Review. That is our immigration court. So think about this. When I go to immigration court to represent a client, my opposing counsel is the Department of Homeland Security, the ICE attorney, and the judge is an employee of the Department of Justice. So that has been very, very challenging lately as you think about who is the head of the Department of Justice. That's the Attorney General. We also sometimes interface with the Department of State and the Department of Labor, but primarily as immigration practitioners, we navigate the different agencies and the bureaucracy of the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, and the Department of Justice, or DOJ. So what does immigration do? As I mentioned before, all of these agencies are responsible for implementing the immigration law. You might be surprised to know the immigration law has not changed in a few decades. Even with this new administration, the law has not changed. What has changed are regulations, policies, different bureaucratic systems in all of these agencies that make it harder for immigrant survivors to obtain relief that they are entitled to under US law. So I mentioned earlier the Department of Homeland Security, and they include the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS. USCIS is the agency that decides on immigration forms of relief. So, for example, we work with a lot of applications for immigration, and these are sent to USCIS, who decides, reads through them and comes to a decision on them. They're like the deciders of these applications. We have U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, or CBP, who are situated at the border and at ports of entries. And of course, we have U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. They are charged with carrying out immigration enforcement of current immigration laws. What we have seen in the past few years that poses a barrier to survivors and to the immigrant community at large is typically USCIS was just considered the agency that makes decisions on immigration applications and not an enforcement player, but that has changed with USCIS taking on more of an enforcement role that typically we used to just expect from ICE. So that has been one of the new, very, very challenging things to work with. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions in the chat box. Okay. I'm gonna go on to discuss immigration relief for survivors. And so what this is I'm gonna share what options are available to survivors of gender-based violence under US immigration law. And our US immigration law is called the Immigration and Nationality Act. Very convoluted laws that are comparable even to our tax laws, I hear. So Dr. Ameen mentioned earlier the UVisa. What the UVisa is U non-immigrant status. The U non-immigrant status is set aside for immigrant survivors of certain crimes. And these are, you can actually pull them up if you search USCIS UVisa. There are a list of crimes that qualify. Not everything makes you a survivor of a crime for the UVisa, but the U non-immigrant status, or UVisa, is for immigrant survivors of these crimes that tend to be very serious, like domestic violence, like rape, like sexual assault, who have suffered mental or physical abuse. So we have to demonstrate that they're helpful to law enforcement or government officials in the investigation or prosecution of criminal activity. Dr. Ameen mentioned earlier the U certification. Before these survivors can even apply for the UVisa, they have to get a certification from law enforcement saying that they were helpful. And that can be very challenging when law enforcement agencies are anti-immigrant and refuse to sign these certifications because they think incorrectly that they are making some sort of determination of immigration status, which is not the case. And so if survivors are able to get a U certification, they can apply for a UVisa, in which they will show that they suffer mental or physical abuse. We include a declaration, we include law enforcement documentation, evidence of the abuse, etc. And the UVisa is, in a sense, a pathway to a green card, because if it is granted, they receive a 4-year temporary non-immigrant status with work authorization. What this means is that this is the UVisa. Non-immigrant statuses are not meant to be permanent. And so that is why if they meet certain other requirements, like remaining in the United States continuously, having that continuous physical presence, after 3 years of having the UVisa, they can apply for a green card. And then after 5 years of having a green card, they can apply for citizenship. So it's a very long process. The T visa, or T non-immigrant status, mirrors a lot of what is going on in the UVisa, without having a requirement for a certification. And so the T visa is set aside for immigrant survivors that are physically present in the United States on account of a severe form of human trafficking. That means that they are here in the US as a result on account of the human trafficking. And that piece has become challenging to prove, particularly for survivors of trafficking who have been in the United States for some time and who have only just come forward with the information. And human trafficking, as you may know, can take many forms. So it can be sex trafficking, it can be labor trafficking. That's the key requirement. Be physically present on account of severe form of human trafficking. There is a requirement for compliance with reasonable requests for assistance from law enforcement, unless they are a child, a minor, or you can show that they are just too traumatized to assist law enforcement. In my experience and in my agency's recent experience, we're not able to be successful with T visa requests if we have not done reporting with law enforcement prior to applying for the T visa. And so that has become difficult because you can imagine the barriers to doing that and the trauma, how traumatic it is for a survivor to report to ICE, even to the FBI, to local law enforcement. And I do see a question in the chat about the law enforcement certification for the UVisa. We are more than happy to train agencies on what this looks like. Just like the UVisa, the benefits of the T visa are, again, a 4-year temporary non-immigrant status that after having 3 years of, you become eligible for a green card if you meet a few other requirements. Now, Dr. Ameen also mentioned the Violence Against Women's Act, or VAWA. And what VAWA does is it allows certain spouses, children, and parents of US citizens and permanent residents or green card holders to file a petition for themselves without the abuser's knowledge. Typically, I'll give you an example in a happy marriage where there's an immigrant and a US citizen. The US citizen, because they want to keep their spouse here in the United States with them to build a life together, will file a petition for their immigrant spouse. In abusive relationships, the lack of immigrant status, of immigration status is used against the immigrant spouse. And so the spouse with status, the US citizen or the green card holder, will not apply for the immigrant spouse. So the VAWA is a way to do this petition for themselves under a lot of confidentiality without the abuser knowledge, so that the immigrant does not have to depend on an abuser for immigration status. Requirements for relief under VAWA is a qualifying familial relationship, which are listed above. And for spouses, so this means that the marriage was entered into in good faith. This means they did not solely get married for immigration benefits. That will not work for VAWA. They also have to demonstrate suffering battery, extreme cruelty. There is no requirement to have reported to law enforcement for VAWA. That's something to keep in mind as to differences between VAWA and the UVisa. They have to have resided with the abuser, and they have to show themselves to be a person of good moral character. Next, we have asylum. And you know, asylum is in the news a lot these days. because of the multiple bans on asylum, increased barriers for people to try to apply for asylum, being forced to remain in Mexico, which is a country that people are also seeking asylum from, while they are able to get to the United States. It is a mess right now. But asylum, our asylum laws come from international laws and the principle of non-refoulement, which means we do not return people to their home countries if they are going to be persecuted there. I have, we often see refugees and asylees, those terms thrown around, but those are different. Asylees are people that come to the United States and are seeking asylum, or once they are here, they have been granted asylum. The difference is that refugees come to the United States already with that immigration designation. They have been very, very strictly vetted in other countries and have probably gone through some sort of resettlement camp before they've come to the United States already as refugees, as people that were granted asylum. Asylum is for people who are unable or unwilling to return to their home countries, or unable or unwilling to avail themselves of the protection of that country. They are afraid to go back to their home countries because they are afraid of being persecuted, and that home country has shown that they will not protect them. So the reasons why someone might be able to apply for asylum is due to persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution. So maybe you were already persecuted, or you fear being persecuted in the future, is what that means, on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, which I will discuss briefly, or political opinion. And so what membership in a particular social group means is it's very broad. Not everything can be a particular social group, but some examples of these are like the case that I mentioned at the beginning, where this young woman was granted asylum based on her fear, her well-founded fear of persecution by being forced to undergo female genital mutilation. And so particular social groups are a place where we as attorneys can get a little bit more creative with our arguments in terms of figuring out what that looks like for each client. And what that looks like in the domestic violence context is in the past asylum claims where we might say this person, their particular social group is Guatemalan women who are unable to leave the relationship. That worked for us in the past, and now while domestic violence asylum claims are not done with, it is very challenging because of a case decided by the Attorney General a few years ago. And so that's an uphill battle for us. The benefits of asylum are permanent protection and work authorization, eligibility for a green card after 1 year of physical presence, and refugee public benefits. Up next, we also have special immigrant juvenile status. And this applies to unmarried children under 21 years of age. In Texas, it's actually under 18 years of age because of the way that our state defines who a child is. But this is unmarried kids who have been abandoned, neglected, and or abused by one or both of their parents. The SIJS, or Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, requires a process in which we have to obtain a final order from a state court judge with certain findings. what these findings look like is showing that the child, it's not in their best interest to return to their home country, is one of the things. It's not possible for the child to be reunified with one or both parents, and they are committed to the custody of the state agency, an individual, maybe like a good parent that's in the United States, or another type of entity. And so this works similarly to how VAWA is. After they obtain the final order from the state court judge, the child can file a self-petition. And once that self-petition is approved, the child may apply for a green card. Let me look to see here if we have any questions. In the meantime, I'll take a sip of water that I really need. Okay. So these are all different types of immigration relief that we work on at the Tahirih Justice Center for our clients. Challenges, there are many challenges in the legal process, but here are a few. The first are that there is an increased risk of being placed in immigration proceedings and facing deportation if the applications are denied. We mentioned earlier hostile law enforcement, and I see here in the chat trainings to law enforcement, judiciary, DA offices to talk about the U certification to help address this particular challenge. Backlogs. These processes take years. For example, with the UVisa right now, there's a wait list, and it takes about 5 years to get on that wait list, and then another 5 years to get a decision. We also see an unsympathetic immigration court system. So I'll pause here and see if there are any questions, but I would refer you all, and I'll put it in the chat, to the Houston Immigration Legal Services Collaborative for a lot of updated immigrant-specific COVID-19 sources. And with that, stay safe, stay healthy. I look forward to seeing more questions in the chat, and I'll have our contact immigration up here. We are the Tahirih Houston office.
Wonderful. Karla, thank you so much. That was really, really great information. If you guys can think of any questions, we can wait just a couple of minutes. If you have a question for Dr. Ameen or for Karla, you can go ahead and type those in the chat. We made it in just over an hour. Good job, you guys. Thanks for those of you who hung in with us. Not necessarily seeing any questions come through. I will send out copies of the slides later this afternoon with a link for the replay as well. Please, please, please feel free to share the link with other people in your offices, in your community that you think could benefit from this information. I know I learned a ton within this hour. So I will send out contact information in the email with the slides and the replay link. So thank you again, ladies, for presenting, and thank you to everybody who has attended. We will be doing other virtual resource fairs each Monday this month, and we also have a professional development series every Thursday. This week we're going to be talking about working with LGBTQ survivors of sexual assault. So if you are not already RSVP'd for that, please go ahead and check out our website, www.mcwctx.org, for more information about how to do that. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us.